Yeah, I just want to go over some slides today that I think people would find quite interesting. And it's really just going over what we can and can't see using dark field microscopy. Because as a dark field microscopist, so, for over 25 years, my training has just been what we're looking at in blood. And anything other than that, I haven't had training in them. And most dark field microscopists wouldn't have had that training either. So I want to show what product looks like under the microscope for dark field microscopy, so people can get an idea of when people are looking at things and making assumptions, it's not necessarily, correct. Just looking at blood, for example, which I think a lot of us are familiar with, these hydrogel, what we're calling construction sites, made of, polymers. Possibly, as a dark field microscopist, again, I can't say what they are or aren't made of because I don't have the correct microscope to make that assumption. But there are people out there who have done that, such as Dr. Young, who does have the correct microscope with spectrometry to name substances within structures that we're looking at. So here, what's been named as a polymer hydrogel construction site. We know that they do have a specific charge, a very positive charge, and this causes the cells to become attracted to each other, to agglutinate, to coagulate, and you can see what's happening around these structures in this particular person's blood. Again, here's another example of that. And we also get what we call hydrogel structures. These are quite familiar for people who've been looking at this work recently. And we get the white blood cells trying to degrade these structures. And quite often it's too much for them to deal with and they can lyse, because we know that these structures are potentially connecting up with the Wi-Fi, and they're signaling out, and this can be affecting the white blood cells. And we know through studies that white blood cell count is coming down when people are in the vicinity of EMFs, over a long period of time. So this would be another reason why. So this is the only video that's not mine. Somebody sent this to me, and I found this quite interesting, because if I just quickly play this, you will see that this construction site or polymer connected up with one of these structures is actually sucking in red blood cells into its body. And I found that really fascinating because, we know that potentially these structures are using our red blood cells or harvesting them to create their own structures and for their energy. So then I just wanted to go on to show also what salt looks like under the microscope, under dark field microscopy. So, this is a salt crystal. It is square. And some people may look at this and say, oh, this is nanotech. It's actually a salt crystal. So, and when we're looking at MasterPeace under the microscope, for example, which is full of marine sea plasma, we may see some of these. So again, somebody could make an assumption that this is nanotech, a microchip of some sort, but it's actually just a salt crystal. And looking at MasterPeace under the microscope, for example, this is a large zeolite crystal, but with dark field microscopy, it refracts the light. We have a dark background and particles show up bright. And especially with zeolites, it's a very bright crystal under the microscope. So this is just one of the crystals caught next to an air bubble that's sort of propelling it along. But again, somebody may say, oh, this is moving and it's it's possibly nanotech, but no, this is just a moving particle in the solution. It's a zeolite crystal being pushed by an air bubble, and it's actually quite beautiful to watch. So the other thing I wanted to show you, these structures that a lot of people are showing in the blood. When we dry the blood out, for example, I'm not talking about dried blood analysis. This is the sample. This is the same slide left for 24 hours. So the sample's dried out. You can see how it's all dried and it's created certain patterns. So whether somebody will say, oh, that's nanotech growing, or maybe it's just dehydrated blood, we don't know. I don't know, unless I was able to actually analyze the compounds. But it's just an interesting observation that you get these patterns from a dried out blood sample. So I just want to show you what happens when I added MasterPeace to this dried out blood sample. So everything became a bit hydrated again with the MasterPeace going in. And let me just play this video. What I did was I was able to take the cover slip off after adding the MasterPeace, and I used a needle to see if I could somehow prod at this structure, because everyone's observing them. At the tip of the needle was able to be moved.
I've seen a lot of these. The structure that she's showing appears to be a malaria type parasite called microfilariae. These were really not seen much until just recently, and the reason for that is because a lot of the products that are being introduced, at least this is what I identified in the Pfizer and the Moderna COVID vaccines, is they had added parasites, specifically identifying Trypanosoma cruzi parasites, and then now the microfilariae parasites that are showing up in the blood of humans. And so this structure appears to be a parasite, microfilariae, a malaria type parasite. These types of parasites can be, a delivery system to move some of the platform material that they're using, the magnetic material of graphene oxide and ferric oxide, into various parts of the body. So just like mosquitoes transfecting you, objective was to move this into various parts of the body for nefarious reasons.
What I noticed was that the MasterPeace really attached onto the structure, because we can see it light up, which, as I've explained, the crystals of the zeolite light up. So when we're looking at potentially, if it does have elements of graphene in it, which is highly positively charged, then the zeolites would be grabbing hold of this structure. But there's nothing else building around it. The zeolites aren't doing anything else. And again, you can see here, it's with the dried up blood with the potential polymers that were around it. You can see that the MasterPeace has, is in the places where that polymer was. So it's grabbing hold of it. Now, what would happen in the body? This is obviously outside the body. We would hope that it would be deactivating it, from what it was, wanting to do with the Wi-Fi, etc., emitting signals and taking in signals. And this was 3 days later, and you can see everything's really dried up now, and there's crystals formed from the marine sea plasma all on it. It's almost like encrusted and encased, and it's just, solid now. And this is the other end of it. So I just thought that was a very interesting experiment to see what would happen to one of these structures under the microscope, and just left it for a few days.